Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast of Jackson and Kyle. I am Jackson, and I'm joined here, as always, by the man who is willing to learn Japanese to be Shohei's next interpreter, Kyle. Kyle, how are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Listen, I can make bets too, man. Just give me the call. I'll hide it a little bit better, I think too.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if they were trying to hide it, they did a pretty bad job putting it just in his name.
Yeah. Between that and the NBA one story this week, I mean, just absolutely insane. Some of these gambling moves.
Yeah, it's I don't know, gambling. It's a hey, everyone out there, 95% of people lose money gambling. Be
Be that
responsible.
5%. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. So you gotta bet as much as you can to make sure you're in that 5%.
Yep, exactly. That's our advice. Just kidding. It is weird, isn't it? Like, I don't know. That's a whole tangent. We could do a whole podcast on that, honestly. I could keep going, but I don't want to get us too far off the rails this quickly.
No, yeah. I mean, listen, hey, there's a reason I haven't taken any gambling sponsorships, but we'll save the gambling podcast for another week. Kyle, we're gonna finish recapping the free agency period here, as we did the AFC last week. It's a very fun show. We're going with the NFC now. Any thoughts before you want to get into it?
No, I think we mostly covered everything. A lot of takes, a lot of opinions about our AFC grades. Did you want to change Kansas City and Tennessee after the L'Jarius Sneed trade?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think I was a big fan of that from Tennessee's perspective. I kind of understand it from the Chiefs. We can talk about that a little bit. I get they didn't want to pay him. They got what they could from him. But yeah, I mean, it has to sting getting rid of a 27-year-old number one corner for just a third round pick.
Yeah, I do think they're going to be okay because they have good corners.
Yeah.
As it is, but yeah, I mean. That's a tough loss, especially when you look at the guys they did pay in the process too, right? Do you think if they could have cut Jawan Taylor to pay L'Jarius Sneed, they say yes?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and again, that's I tweeted out, like, that's why I was so hard on that contract. Like, people, every time someone gets signed, people just think of, oh yeah, we got a good player. It's like, you have a limited amount of money.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I still think they'll replace him okay. I think it makes a lot of sense for Tennessee. I mean, whether I think you're going to be a competitive team or not next year, although they're really trying to, it seems like. So we'll see how this works out for them. But they got a good player at a pretty low cost. I mean, the contract's big, but pretty low cost overall.
And even the contract, like under $20 million a year, it's like, I mean, It's big for a corner, but corners don't get paid a ton. So, let's get into the free agency tracker. I'm sure I have plenty to talk about, as the show goes along. Let's start off with a team that, might not have to spend forever on, the Dallas Cowboys here, Kyle, who kind of it's been the ongoing joke of how little the Cowboys have done. They have lost players. So there's that of, Tyron Smith, Tony Pollard, Gilmore's still a free agent currently. Dorrance Armstrong, Tyler Badaz. How do you say his? I still don't know how to say his last name. But we'll go with that. But in general, it's been a disappointing offseason for Dallas. They haven't sunk themselves in any contracts, but I'm going to go with a D here, as I kind of feel like you should be kind of almost more going all in, and they have money to spend. It's not like they can't spend money here. But kind of the lack of moves, I'm going with a D. I'm not going to go full F, but it's been underwhelming.
Yeah, I would say D because they got worse, right? Like, this is a team that, as disappointing as that playoff game was, and, we say this every year with Dallas, as disappointing as that playoff loss was, like, this was the team that was a, quote unquote Super Bowl contender, right? Like, they were in the conversation. They had an MVP candidate quarterback, and they played really good football last year. So they were in the conversation. Didn't work out for them in the playoffs. And I think this team's worse this year. I think it is. And, I still don't love some of the players. They didn't address any needs either. They're weaker. I think Leighton Vander Esch is probably better than Eric Kendricks. And yeah, I think that they got some issues here. So yeah, I think that they're a slightly worse team going into next season so far. Maybe that changes by draft or with a few trades, but right now I say D.
The other move they made or didn't make, I should say, is they did not extend Prescott. That was kind of the question of, are they going to give Prescott a big extension this year? They're waiting, and it's kind of come out that they plan on waiting until free agency. Not saying they won't re-sign him, but they are going to let him test the waters, which is, I don't know, maybe we're in a new era with Kirk Cousins leaving teams. Maybe these kind of non-elite quarterbacks will start to shift teams a little bit. I don't know. It's interesting. I think it's probably the right move to not pay Prescott when he's coming off of his career best season.
Yeah, I mean, if he plays well again next year, you pay him.
Yeah.
And if it starts to slip up and it looks a little more like 2 years ago, then you can have the conversation, or you just negotiated down a lower deal, right?
Right.
Like paying him after this season, I think that makes sense when this is still the outlier. It would be interesting though, like if they decide to pull the Minnesota and let him walk, like the difference, like I think Minnesota is pretty content with sitting through a rebuild. Is, Jerry Jones in Dallas going to be pretty content with that same option? Like as controversial I think Dak Prescott is, like if they let him walk, they're not going to be good. Trey Lance isn't going to fix things.
Yeah, I was trying to think, like, is there a quarter, like, is there another quarterback they would re-sign in this? Because you're right, like that's just not what they do. Are they going after Jared Goff?
I mean, they could, I guess, but I mean, that just feels like moving money around, right?
I suppose. Is Trey Lance going to take over?
That's what I said. I don't think that fixes anything.
No, I don't think so either. Interesting spot were the Cowboys, who've kind of been stuck in no man's land a little bit. Let's go to the Eagles, who were just in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Look, at one point they had the best record in football. I believe 10-1 was their record. Proceeded to just completely fall off a cliff when their defense, which was bad all year, stayed bad, and their offense stopped playing well, which made them a straight up a bad team. They're getting blown up by the Giants in a game they're trying to win in the final week of the season. They've made some moves. You can't say they haven't done anything. They have been making moves. The question is, have they been making the right moves? Going after Saquon Barkley was kind of a question there. They traded for Kenny Pickett is another thing. They added Bryce Huff, which not necessarily like they needed edge rushers, but that's where they put their money in. They added Devin White as well, CJ Gardner-Johnson for a 3-year, $33 million deal. Haven't really addressed kind of their key weakness here. I think I'm going to go with I'm not crazy about this, Kyle. I think I'm going to go with a D here. Like they got players and it's going to help out their roster, but they still haven't addressed what they needed to address.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things though where I'm going back and forth on it. Like I ended up just settling on B because I think they got really talented players. Like I do think Saquon, like, is that a lot for a running back? Probably. But I think Saquon's going to be pretty nasty in this offense. Yeah, I really do. And I think Huff is also a good player, even though that wasn't, I don't think, their biggest need. Although they did lose a few guys on the edge too. So maybe bring him in and, losing a few guys, that's okay.
And I think we're assuming they're going to trade Reddick, which is probably the other factor in that.
Yeah. I do think CJ Gardner-Johnson is probably a player. I mean, he wasn't that good last year, but he was good in Philadelphia. So maybe he kind of finds that juice again, because they do need a safety. I'm not buying that Devin White is going to fix their linebacker issues. I watched Devin White play the last 2 years. I don't think that's going to happen. So we'll see on that one. But I mean, at the very least, it's a pretty good flyer. Maybe you kind of figure out, get rid of some of his weaknesses. He's still an incredible athlete, but that kind of stuff. So I think they got really talented players, and I'm okay with saying let's take the chance on that and see what happens. But yes, they still need a linebacker. They're going to have to find a center pretty desperately, I think, in the draft. That's probably number one priority at this point. And they got a few other positions in need too. I don't think CJ Gardner-Johnson is going to solve all of their safety issues, but yeah, I mean, this is still a team that I think the spine of this team is lacking a little bit. I think this team's lacking up front. I think this team's lacking at linebacker still, and those are things they're going to have to fix.
Yeah, I mean, it almost, in a lot of ways, too, feels like they're just banking on those veteran corners to get better, right?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to. They're going to have to, right? They're going to have to play better, and, maybe if the pass rush also bounces back, you don't have to worry about coverage so much because you're getting to the quarterback. But, that was the thing about Philadelphia last year is, like, they had all those guys on the defensive line that we liked all of those guys, and when they weren't getting to the quarterback, it became very apparent they couldn't cover for very long. So I think that was definitely an issue for them. And, there also is probably a hope that some of the young guys that they've drafted over the years also take some leaps, right? Like Jalen Carter, I definitely think hit a bit of a wall, but he's still an incredible player. Jordan Davis, I think, has had some up and down moments. Nakobe Dean's a guy. They didn't they get another Georgia guy?
I think so. I think they got like about a dozen other Georgia guys.
Nolan Smith, right? Isn't that who they got? Yeah. Maybe he can turn into something too. He was always kind of a, interesting prospect, but probably a flyer. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a whole lot that they could get better at still just by natural growth. But I did think they got talented players.
Sure. My negative grade has nothing to do with their, the lack of getting players. It's doesn't matter how good Jalen Carter is if, quarterbacks can get rid of the ball in 1 second.
Yeah. So. And maybe that just naturally gets better because it was bad last year.
Sure, definitely a possibility, and we'll obviously have plenty more to talk about with them as we go along. Let's go to the New York Giants, who didn't give a quarterback $40 million a year this year. So, well done, getting better. I guess I'm just negative today. I did not love the Brian Burns move at all. I'm going with a D here as well for the Giants, and we can get into that. What did you think for the Giants?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, people are definitely gonna come for you on this one, I think, because I think the Giants fans really like their offseason, right? I said B. I thought it was good. I think I'm a little more optimistic than you, it seems like so far. I think that there's some pretty good players in this crew. And, it's one of those things, too, where I don't think Brian Burns was necessarily their biggest need, but I don't think it hurts to have a player of that caliber. I mean, this might be the best defensive line in football next season. If, Thibodeau plays a little bit better, makes another leap. And with him, with Burns, with Lawrence, I mean, that's a pretty formidable trio at least. So I think it's I do think that's a B. And I do think that, I'm okay with a team sometimes doubling down on a strength and just say, we are going to dominate this part of the game. And, it's a different thing than I think the way you would build a football team, building through the defensive line. But I think that defensive line is also going to be really nasty.
Sure. I get the logic because I get that, and listen, if it was what I think is the right team building philosophy, I would give it an F. But I get that it's like different team building philosophies. I'm not going to crush them for just viewing football differently than I do. I don't know. $30 million a year for 5 years for, I don't know, the 25th best pass rusher and 25th best edge rusher in football, and also giving up a second and fifth rounder. That's a lot. That's and the second rounder is a high second rounder as well because they obviously didn't have a great record last year. That just feels like a lot to me.
It's a huge contract. It really is a huge contract. I think I wouldn't be shocked if he plays better than that 25th best, right? I wouldn't be surprised if he climbs up the ranks a little bit. I think he's a better player than that. I think last year was a weird year in Carolina. So we'll see. I mean, a couple other moves I think they made too. I mean, they added pieces on the offensive line. I'm not sure if they're better or worse because of them. Mark Lewinsky did not make the roster again this next season. So, I guess that's a addition by subtraction. But yeah, I mean, I think that overall, they have some pieces here that they can work with. I think it's going to be a better team, and I do think that they have a strength here.
Listen, sure, agreed. Go back to the Brian Burns thing. I'm not saying I think Brian Burns is actually probably an underrated player, if anything. But I don't know. I mean, what about Brian Burns screams he's not an elite player, right? We can certainly he's nowhere near a TJ Watt, Myles Garrett type of player. He's getting paid like that. He's had one season where he's had over 10 sacks. Now he's had 2 9-sack seasons and an 8-sack season. So he's been consistently fringe 10-sack guy over the course of his career. And his advanced metrics are they're kind of around there, right? He's a solid, and it's not like the Panthers haven't had good defenses in the past few years. They haven't had great offenses, but Derek Brown's no slouch playing next to him. Derek Brown is a great player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that. So, Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a big contract. I won't deny that.
I'll say
But I
this
think,
too. I
yeah,
agree with you. I think he's going to be really good. And I think the Giants defensive line is going to be really good. Like, I think he'll probably get 10 sacks. I think it'll work out. I just think it's not the best allocation of resources, in my opinion.
yeah. But they're already in a tough position with allocation of resources, right? Like,
Yeah, because they
maybe
keep
you
giving
could.
out these contracts.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Mm-hmm.
true. Uh, we're gonna see how it goes. That's how I
Sure.
feel. But I mean, at the same time, like, it's one of those things where I still feel like I look at the Giants and I think they got better. I think they got better on both sides of the ball. Even losing Saquon, I think those offensive line additions will help marginally, and maybe this team takes a little bit of a leap that way, and then they're nasty on defense.
And it's so just I remember looking at this trade, I'm like, of course I hate another Giants move. Like I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
I genuinely have nothing against the Giants whatsoever, but every move they make I hate.
they're gonna come for you, man. They're coming for you.
I know. And like if I was a Giants fan, I would think that I hated the Giants. Like for what I say. Like I get why they're mad at me. I fully get it. I genuinely, if anything, I'm kind of warm towards the Giants, but that's just how it happens to go.
Noted Giants hater Jackson Kruger doesn't like the offseason. What do you think of the Commanders?
Yeah, so let's move on. Might have to pick up a little bit of the pace, but there's a lot to talk about with a couple of these teams. I don't know. It's a weird one, I guess I would say. They did lose, a good corner here, Kendall Fuller. Lost Cameron Curl. So it was a rough and lost Frankie Louvu. So or no, they added Frankie Louvu. Excuse me. But they losing Cameron Curl and Kendall Fuller, who are when you had two good players in your secondary, always good to let them go. But I don't know. I don't know what to make of this team. Bobby Wagner is kind of a steal for the contract. I'm surprised he, agreed to that. Frankie Louvu should be good. They're building the Dan Quinn scheme, which need, they need linebackers. I don't know. I really don't know what to make of this. I think Austin Eckler's solid. Marcus Mariota should be a good backup for whoever they draft. It's like a C for me. I'm fine with this.
All right, I got another B.
Okay. Interesting.
I mean, look, I think, Wagner and Louvu are going to be a really nice linebacker duo. I think Eckler is going to help this team. I do think, you look across the roster and, I think that this is pretty good players throughout. They added help on the offensive line with the center from Dallas. I forget his name for a second here. Biadaz, I think it is. Jeremy Chin is a guy they added that, had pretty good moments in Carolina, and they got him for, $5 million, I think it is. I thought that was a pretty good deal too. So, I think I like the moves overall. And I think, it's another one where I felt like there was a clear intent to try and improve this defense this offseason, and I think they did. The one issue I have is I think this team could have desperately used an edge rusher, and they didn't really add anybody of note. But we'll see. Maybe that's what's addressed starting with the second round pick in the draft.
Yeah, first we have a super chat. Joe Jackson, you were right about the contracts. Giants can't commit to the rebuild. I think the outlook next year will really depend on if they take a quarterback. Even Giants fans are arguing with me, Kyle.
Well, maybe they're back on your side.
I think so. Yeah, perhaps. I agree. I like the Jeremy Chin move a lot. I think that's the exact right team to make a move like that. Of hey, we're not going to be good. Let's take flyers. Like they would have been a smart team for like a Devin White move, right? Of like let's just see what they do. I'm a little surprised because last year you crushed the Bears for going after linebackers. Like I mean, kind of what we're saying about the Commanders is if you ignore their secondary and their edge rushers, then they're pretty good. Like that's kind of a big part of football.
Yeah, but the thing is the Bears paid top of the line for two linebackers without the rest of their stuff. Mm-hmm. Like this, it was a 1-year deal for Bobby Wagner, and what'd they pay? I mean, Louvu is making basically what, $10 million a year?
Yeah, 3 years, $36 million, so a little bit over 10.
Yeah, I mean that feels like that's a much better deal to me than paying the two guys that Chicago paid last year that I'm drawing a blank on for a second here. For paying them top of the line money, which ended up working out. The defense actually played well. But yeah, I just think that, those are much more favorable deals. Like you said, like this team probably isn't going to be like awesome next year, but I do think the defense did get better still. And, even getting a guy like Chin and, the secondary already wasn't good last year and the pass rush already wasn't good last year. So at least adding a couple pieces that I think on good contracts too, I think helps.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Let's get to finally my first positive grade. Lions, love this offseason. A plus, a big fan.
Love the offseason. What'd you like the most?
I think DJ Reader, your guy, DJ Reader, that feels like a great. Really, I mean, how often do we see interior defensive linemen get $10 million just for being an interior defensive lineman? Right? It feels like the guy just like they go out and pay that much. So like the fact that he's only getting a little bit more than that for being like an elite level run stuffer feels really good. I love the Carlton Davis addition. They lost to Jonah Jackson, but they added Kevin Zeitler, so I think it's kind of a wash there. They lost C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who most Lions fans were ready to be done with. So like I don't know, losing Josh Reynolds will have an impact, but I think they'll be okay. Like even like Marcus Davenport, I'm interested in that signing. So as a whole, I think that they've addressed what they needed to address.
Yeah, I got this as an A. This team had an opportunity here to go all in, and I think they've basically gone all in, right? They've addressed the areas that I think are the biggest issues on this team, which were corner and defensive line, and they got really good players, I think, at both positions. DJ Reader, I think, is a fantastic addition to this team. He's going to help stop the run, although they were not bad at stopping the run last year. That wasn't really their weak spot, but it's another thing doubling down on that strength. And then you're getting a guy at Carlton Davis who can be a number one corner on this team. So I think that's a huge move there. They're going to get Emmanuel Mosley for really good for 5 or 6 games before, another injury, but at least that's going to help for 5 or 6 games. So I like the additions they made in the secondary. I like the defensive line additions, and yeah, I think it's going to be a really good team that's going all in.
Hope don't draft the running back in round 1 next year. That it is the year. That's all I ask from Detroit.
I don't think they're going to do it 2 years in a row. I think we're okay there.
Yeah, I think again, last year we were all raving about their free agency, and then they had their draft, and then we weren't as crazy. And then the draft ended up being great, but just for other players stepping up. So Lions doing some smart stuff.
Yeah. What do you think? They got to go receiver probably first round, right?
Well, I think they're in a pretty good spot where I don't think they have to go anywhere.
Yeah, that's true.
Because even like first round, you can get a receiver in round 2 or 3. Like their scheme isn't dependent on elite receivers.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I mean, it definitely wouldn't hurt to have one if there is one there. But, I mean, I don't even know who's going to be available. I mean, there might be 4 receivers off the board by the time they pick. This receiver draft's crazy.
Yeah.
But I also think it's deep, so there's a lot of good players there.
Yeah, I agree. Let's move on. Let's go to the Packers here, who a lot of people, big fans of the Packers free agency. I am a fan of the Packers free agency. I wouldn't say big fan. I'm going to go B. I like the Xavier McKinney signing, although I am always concerned about signing a secondary player when they've really had kind of the one great season. They've always had multiple good seasons for the Giants, especially figuring, what they've had in the secondary around him. It's kind of really impressive. So I like that move. Although I think it's fair value for him. I don't know how much I feel about the Josh Jacobs contract, to be honest. But there definitely is the high upside there. So I'm a fan of this free agency thing. Obviously, losing Aaron Jones could hurt, but he is getting up there in age. So yeah, B is where I'm going. Where are you going?
I'm with the B too. I definitely think that the ceiling of this offseason could be potentially a Super Bowl contender, right? Like, I would say safety was probably their biggest need in the free agency, and they got debatably the best safety on the market, right? So I think that's a huge get. And then, I don't know, like, there's a chance I think Josh Jacobs is awesome for this team. And there's also a chance that they really didn't get any better between Jacobs and Aaron Jones, right? Or there's a chance that, he looks slow and it gets worse. But yeah, I mean, there is a chance this works out. It is a big contract, I think, for a running back that isn't one of the top 3 to 4 guys, in my opinion. But, at his best, he's been at that level. So maybe he can play at that best. This Packers team is going to be good. It all comes down to the defense, I think. Can this defense get better, and can Jordan Love kind of, do that thing again and, kind of have another great season as he did the second half of the year? That's kind of what it comes down to, but I think they did a good job addressing those needs. Yeah,
I agree. Let's move on. Let's go to what'd you give the Minnesota Vikings?
Minnesota, this is a tough one. I mean, like, you could argue that, like, going all in on Kirk Cousins again would have been a mistake, right? Like at some point you kind of have to cut the bait and move on. And this is going to be a teardown thing. I did have it as a C because I think this team did get significantly worse. I do think this team's not going to be good. Or this team's probably, I don't know if not going to be good. It's definitely going to be a worse team. And they're in a really tough division now going into next season. That being said, like I like some of these contracts here. Like, I mean, you know, Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel aren't perfect players, but I think they're pretty good edge players. And losing Danielle Hunter and getting those two guys, I think that's not too bad. I think that's pretty good at making sure it doesn't fall off there. You know, getting a guy like Aaron Jones 1 year, $6 million, I think makes a lot of sense. So I went C, but I do think this team's going to be worse.
They're definitely going to be worse. I went A because I think that getting worse is part of the plan that I'm trying to do here. I think that it's sometimes you have to move backwards to move forwards. And I do think that signing that Kirk Cousins contract, it's essentially saying for the next 4 years, we're not going to win a Super Bowl probably not even we're not going to go on a deep playoff run. You're handcuffing yourself with something like that. I get why Atlanta did it. I think Atlanta was in a different situation than Minnesota is in. We'll talk about them in a minute. But obviously it's never good to lose guys like Cousins and Danielle Hunter for nothing. In hindsight, it would have been nice to trade them. Could have and gotten some value, but it didn't happen. I'm with you. Like, Jonathan Grenard's 26. He could be good for a while. Like, I think there's other interesting moves, but I think really in general, teams more often need to say, you know what, let's wash our hands. Let's do a full rebuild. That's what they're trying to do. They add another first round pick. We'll see in the draft, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I guess, I've been doing a lot of these grades based on the next year projections and just, guessing that this team is going to be significantly worse. That, if you got significantly worse, I'm giving you a lower grade. But I can see if you're judging the long-term vision, this could work out. This could definitely work out. And now they have 2 picks in the first round too that they have to work with, whether they try and move up or whether they take someone at their first pick. We'll see. But, this team is definitely primed to take a quarterback in the draft, and we'll see how much better it gets.
Yeah. Let's finish up the division with the Chicago Bears, who, the one move I didn't love was how they kind of got rid of, they weren't able to get a ton for Fields, but at the end of the day, they want to move off of him. Take what you can get is kind of how I view it. Made some really interesting moves with, adding, Gerald Everett, who I think should be a good solid piece. I think the Jalen Johnson re-signing feels like kind of a steal. So, I like that. But the thing that puts this over the top for me is the Keenan Allen. That makes it an A for me. Needed a situation for Caleb Williams that, their goal is different, right? What they're trying to do is different than what other teams are trying to do. Getting at times an elite level receiver for not having to give up a ton of, draft cap, but big fan of that. I'm going A.
Yeah, I had A+. I mean, actually, I'll change it. I'll go A just because I have one thing that I'm nitpicking, but I could just be kind of being a pill. But look, I mean, I Jalen Johnson, I mean, that contract's fantastic. I mean, that guy was debatably the best corner in the league last year. $76 million at 4 years. That's a really good number, I think, for an elite corner. I love the Keenan Allen trade. I like getting a guy like Gerald Everett, who I think makes a ton of sense here too. I like the 2 tight end sets that they could potentially run. Yeah, I mean, this team's a much better across the board, and they're going to get the best quarterback prospect in 11 years, 12 years at least. So that's an A for me. The only thing, that DeAndre Swift contract's kind of weird. But, that's the only thing I really didn't like. I don't get paying DeAndre Swift that money, but, I guess you could also say we're getting a rookie quarterback. Why not try and just go all in? But, I mean, there was better running backs to pay on the market than DeAndre Swift too. That's the weird part. So yeah, I didn't love that, but overall, I think this is an A.
Yeah, even adding Kevin Byard is a good one as well. So yeah, big fan of what the Bears are doing. Let's move on. Let's go to my team, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A+++. Best off season out of all of them. Kyle, amazing.
Best off season out of all of them.
Yeah, maybe of all time. Maybe best off season that's ever existed. No, okay. I'm obviously kidding. I'm going to be here. I didn't love the Carlton Davis trade. I thought that they were able to re-sign everybody to pretty reasonable deals, though. So I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm with you too. B, they brought back the key players. I mean, I think they would have liked to keep Shaq Barrett too, but obviously someone had to go at some point because they paid a lot of money for, they didn't overpay Baker, which I thought was the big thing. Mike Evans on a good contract. Um, getting Levante David back, getting Jordan Whitehead. I think all those were good moves. The Davis one does sting though. This corner room has been chipped away at. It looks like the last couple of years, and I think that's going to hurt.
Yeah, they did add Tavier Thomas, who was up and down, but at times was a really good slot receiver, or excuse me, slot corner for the Houston Texans. So interested in seeing what he can do. They still need an outside corner. I do not want to do if this is the whole year of Zion McCollum, it falls to an F, Kyle.
That's definitely what they're addressing in the draft, right?
Yeah.
So go get a top of the line corner and see if that works out. But yeah, I mean, I think everything else was pretty good. And, maybe there just had to be a cap casualty at that point.
Yeah, they had to make some moves. I'm a fan of it. I don't think we have too much more to talk about. So let's go to the New Orleans Saints. Why don't we? The Saints had an interesting offseason in their own right, kind of their headliner being the Chase Young, move. Kyle, what was your thoughts on the New Orleans Saints?
Pretty good. I liked a lot of the moves they made. Like, you mentioned the Chase Young thing. I think that's a really good flyer. I think that they added some pieces to this offense. I like getting a player like, oh wait, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong notes. My bad. But yeah, getting several guys here. Here we go. All right. Lock back in. I think they got good players, though. I really do. You mentioned a few of those guys. I think getting a guy like Marcus May, I think getting Tyrann Mathieu back on an extension, that's a good deal. A player like Willie Gay, I think, also is really going to help. So, yeah, I think this is a B. I thought that they did a good job of getting better.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have a B as well. Can't they just have a bad offseason every now and then?
Eventually, they're going to have to get rid of some of these guys, right? We keep waiting for it. It's never going to happen.
Are we concerned at all about the Nathan Peterman signing?
If he ever has to see the field, I guess, but let's just hope that doesn't happen.
Poor Nathan Peterman. What a no! I mean, like realistically, Nathan Peterman is probably as good as a backup as 10 other backups that have floated around the league, right? It's just because he had that one game where he was terrible when he got the start over Tyrod Taylor. That's like what's poor guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. Definitely tough. Never want to be called the worst at something, right?
Probably. I don't know. Yeah, I suppose so. Because even if you're the worst at something bad, like if you're the worst murderer, like you still are, like you're still a murderer.
Yeah. And, I imagine if you decide to commit murder, you want to be good at it, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think with the whole what people tell you in school, like whatever you want to do in life, just make sure you're the best at it.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, what's next? Atlanta Falcons?
Yes, let's go to the Falcons, who, obviously had the big, Kirk Cousins contract. That's what it's all around, right? They did, had a weird thing where they traded Desmond Ridder for Rondale Moore. I'm not saying Rondale Moore is like a great player or anything. I don't really get what the Cardinals were doing there. I don't know why. I guess maybe they were ready to cut Moore and wanted to, I don't know. That was weird. Obviously Kirk Cousins, the big one. They also added, I think Ray McLeod is interesting. They're kind of collecting wide receiver fours. Darnell Mooney, has shown flashes of being like a wide receiver too. Hasn't done it consistently though. They're giving him wide receiver 2 money, 3 years, $39 million to Kirk Cousins. I'm going for C here. I'm not going to crush them for the Kirk Cousins contract the way I might other teams because I think they are in kind of a unique scenario. But it's still there's a big risk here and not the highest of rewards.
I agree. I also had this C. Yeah, I mean, I just think like Cousins is going to be a good player. He's going to upgrade this quarterback position. And if you're just making, maybe this should be like a B or, higher if I'm saying, is this team going to be better next season? Because I do think Cousins is going to make this team better next season. But it's not a young player that you're giving a heck of a lot of money, $180 million. I think only 110 of it's guaranteed, but still that's, a decent chunk of change too. So, that's a big contract. And And we'll see if it works. I ended up liking the deal. I'm still more pro Kirk Cousins, and I still think he's got a few good years in him. And I do think that, like you said, this is the kind of team that needed to go get a quarterback. So it made a lot of sense. What I didn't like as much, I don't know if this receiver room actually got better despite the investments made in it. Like, Darnell Mooney and Rondell Moore are fine. And I guess Ray McLeod too. So like, those are fine players. I don't think any of them are the number 2 guy that they kind of desperately needed next to Drake London. So we'll see if any of those guys can step up into that role. But yeah, I mean, I think those are one of my biggest issues. Like that's a lot of investment in receiver for probably not that much better.
Yeah, and obviously they have Kyle Pitts in the mix as well. I mean, they're banking on just Kyle Pitts and Drake London being way better without Arthur Smith, right? Like that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and London was already a really good player as it was too.
Yeah.
So it could work, and I wouldn't be surprised if Pitts has an awesome season, but we'll see.
Yeah, is Drake London one of the most underrated receivers in football? Because every fan base thinks their favorite receiver is underrated, but are the Falcons right with Drake London?
Yeah, probably. I mean, he's got to be in the conversation. But I also think people know he's really good, and he's just not getting the ball. So
yeah, that's true.
I think that plays a part in it.
I think he kind of gets thrown in with like Kyle Pitts. I'm like, oh, once they get a new thing, like they'll be good. Like Drake London is good. I just think he could be even better in a new system.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, he is going to be good with Kirk Cousins, I think. I do think this is going to be a pretty interesting offense to watch next year.
Can I give my reason why you don't give this contract speech real quick for like, a minute, try to explain what's going on here? Why I don't like, yeah. So the essential logic behind, I think a lot of people, essential logic behind it is you only get one quarterback, and a guy like Patrick Mahomes will give your team like 5 wins, and his contract makes it so that, he's essentially worth like $100 million would be the thing. So while he's only getting paid 50, he's basically saving his team 50 million. Someone like Brock Purdy is kind of worth like 50 million, but is getting paid 1 million. So he's also kind of saving his team 50 million. Someone like Kirk Cousins, he actually is still worth more than what he's going to get paid. He's getting paid 45 million and might be worth around like 60 million total. But it's just like, that's essentially, you're like 35 million behind those guys with the great contracts, which is why it makes you more likely to make the playoffs, but less likely to, to win a Super Bowl. Was that a good Cliff Notes version of it, Kyle?
Yeah, I get it. Makes a lot of sense. And I agree with everything you said. That being said, what if Atlanta's goal is just to make the playoffs? Like,
sure. Then nailed it.
Yeah. And I also just think I think it's just one of those things where it's, I see this a lot too in the NBA where like teams are talking about like tearing down teams, and it's like, sometimes it's just more fun to be better. Like,
sure.
Sometimes it is just more fun to be better and actually like have a chance. And, this is a team that also, obviously Matt Ryan had an MVP season that year, but, had Matt Ryan turn into a Super Bowl caliber quarterback, and they were right there at the end of that game. And, just in case you were wondering, the Patriots did win that Super Bowl. But
that's right. I remember that.
Yeah. Not talked about that often, that game.
No, that's a real underrated game.
Yeah. But I don't think Matt Ryan had that season, and he didn't replicate that season the rest of his career. So maybe they're hoping. What if Kirk Cousins has one season like that? We just saw Dak Prescott have it too. I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility, right?
Yeah, well, Kirk Cousins also has debatably Kyle Shanahan to thank for some of his best years as well. So you can make both make the argument both ways there, I suppose, with that. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting with what they're doing. Let's move on. Let's go to the Panthers, they were busy. I talked about, I'm a fan of the Brian Burns move. I think that was the right call. Although, again, we all, they actually made a move earlier today with the Jadeveon Clowney signing. I really like the Deontay Johnson trade, but I still feel like I wanted to see them, and they addressed the offensive line, but paid a lot of money there. I still wanted to see them go after receivers more, though. I guess I think I'm going to go, I don't know, I'll go B. I think they're probably going to draft a receiver. But I still would have liked to see them put more of an emphasis on completely building around Bryce Young. Not to say they didn't put any emphasis on it, but I would have liked to see more.
Nah, man, come on. This is an A. I have it as an A.
Okay.
I liked it. I think Deontay Johnson's value is insanely good at that trade. I think he's going to be a really good player for them. I mean, he is by far the best receiver this team has had compared to last year. And even I would say, compared to last year, that he is way better than everybody they had. And I think they reinforced the front, which I think is a bigger reason for why they're kind of making this move. I mean, Damian Lewis is a pretty good guard. I think Robert Hunt is a really good guard who they paid really good guard money. So, they're reinforcing that offensive line. Ashawn Robinson's a guy I think that can help on the defensive line. Him and Derek Brown is a pretty interesting duo, I think. Josie Jewell. I mean, you can go down the list here. I mean, they had money to spend, and they definitely weren't afraid to spend it for sure. Yeah, I think this team's a lot better, and I think that they really helped themselves. I still think I agree with you. They should have went more at receiver. They probably could have got more aggressive in that market, but at least they got better, and I think they have an opportunity in this draft to add a couple receivers. I said earlier, this is a really deep receiver draft. They're going to have to get a couple players off the board there, but I do think they got better at that spot.
Well, here's why I'm lower on it, because, and I still like the offseason as a whole, but for me, it's similar to what I said with Chicago. Their mindset is different. Like what they're doing and what Atlanta is doing is two different things. Atlanta's trying to win, so it's all about how good of a roster did they build. Carolina, at least in my opinion, should be saying we have to be able to evaluate Bryce Young this year. After this year, worst case scenario should be we know Bryce Young's not the guy, we can move on. And like the receiving core got better, but Deontay Johnson, what are we going to get out of Adam Thielen at this point in his career? He was good last year, but is that going to continue? And then Jonathan Mingo and Terrence Marshall are like number 3 and 4. Maybe you'll draft a guy, but who knows how that'll work? And they don't have a tight end receiving option. It's still a pretty big weakness at this point.
It is. They do have pick 33.
Yeah,
I think that they can get a good receiver there. So
again, I gave it a B. I'm just saying that's why I didn't give it an A.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. They could have got a little bit more aggressive, but I can't hate it when they got that value out of Johnson. I mean, that's a really good player. I mean, I guess they could have doubled down on it, and maybe they still can. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to see how this team drafts, but I think they did a good job.
Yeah, I agree. And again, last time I did this, I said, where's the receiver? They traded for Deontay Johnson. This is still a, right now type thing. Things can change. Let's move on. Why don't we? Let's go to the San Francisco 49ers. Another team that has made some moves. Kyle, that's not a great intro for them. A team that has made some moves, not really narrowing it down. Kyle, what are your thoughts on the 49ers?
They were fine. There were some moves that they had to make, and there were unfortunately some cap casualties for them. I did go a C because I think that they added some pretty good players there, but I do think guys like losing a guy like Eric Armstead, I do think is impactful. But if you're going to argue for a team, and Chase Young too, obviously, but if you're going to argue a team was equipped to lose a couple players, I think you would probably say the 49ers. So I still think they're going to be really good. I still think they're talented. And I do think, getting a couple guys on this roster, I think really helps. So I said C.
Yeah, I'm interested in Leonard Floyd, Devondre Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
Like they got some interesting players. I would have liked to see them address the offensive line a little bit more. I thought that was a weakness for them last year. Josh Dobbs for a cheap deal, like that's a good move. Like he was a good backup when he was out there. So, and that's obviously something to have to pay attention to, being San Francisco and how often their quarterbacks get injured. I'm with you. I'm going to see. It's a total fine offseason.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Like, who could they have gotten given their cap situation? They had other guys to pay too. Who could they have gotten at offensive line that really would have made a significant upgrade, I guess? That I think that was the tough part is they weren't going to be able to go get a Robert Hunt type or something like that, or something, a player of that caliber.
And they have a different scheme. So guys that are good in others, like, is it good to go out and pay big money in free agency? Like usually not. Usually you want to draft a guy anyway. So I'm with you. I think they'll probably draft some guys and figure it out. That's just one of my, the critique I would have would be that.
Yeah, I can get it. So yeah, that's probably why it's not higher too. And like you said, they added a few pieces. They went pretty heavy on edge with Gross Matos, and who was the other guy they got? You mentioned his name, and I'm drawing a blank now. Let me pull up.
I
Leonard Floyd. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's like $19 million a year for those two guys. But Floyd is a pretty good player.
Yeah, that was a weird one as well. The Yetur Gross Matos. I don't know. If you were a hype draft prospect, you're usually set for life. As long as you don't completely suck, you're okay.
Yeah. Do you think they trade Ayuk? That's probably how I dock this more, right? Like if they actually end up having to trade him.
Yeah, I mean, if they trade Ayuk, this is an F. Like, I think that, like, I don't care what you get back for him. Like, he's such a big part of that team. Like, I think I don't think so. I think they give him a deal.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, their window is right now, whether they want to admit it or not. Like, I know Purdy is going to be due a contract, but their window is right now with this roster.
Yeah, I would view it as you have 2 years of Purdy to try to go win a Super Bowl. That's how I would view it. Maybe he'll be good enough that he can win after getting paid, but that's how I would view it right now.
Yeah. Dude, shut
up. Oh, it's a dog.
I don't know why she's even whining. She's like leaning up against me.
Does she have to go out?
No, I think she eats around 5 o'clock, so she always gets antsy by the end of the podcast.
Okay, gotcha. Understood. Yeah. Well, let's move on. Let's go to the Rams, who, I mean, I'm not going to count the Aaron Donald retiring because that's not, what are you supposed to do about that? I'm kind of just mostly focused on what decisions they made, and they made some interesting decisions. They added Jonah Jackson to try to help out the offensive line. They've added Kevin Dotson, so they've gotten a couple of high-profile good guards. Added Cameron Curl to try to help out the defense. Obviously, they recently signed Tre'Davious White, which is supposed to help out that defense. So they're, and they also have they have 14 draft picks coming up in this draft because, of course, they do, and a first rounder, which is unusual for them. So, I mean, again, I think this is a fine off season for them. I'm not blown away by a lot of their moves or anything like that, but I don't know. I think they did a solid job. I'm in between B or C, but I'll go C.
I went B, and bordering on B plus. I mean, I like those guards. I really do, and I think that Dotson contract is great. So I think those are both really good moves. And I like Darius Williams. I like Cameron Curl. Those are both guys coming in that I think could be really impactful. So I really like all that. And I think that defense is going to be formidable. I think this team had offensive line issues for a couple of years now and are significantly better at that position. And like you said, I mean, if you're taking the Aaron Donald thing out of the equation, that would probably dock it to a C for me because, I mean, there's just no replacing Aaron Donald. There's nothing they could do about it. But, I mean, that's a really tough situation to overcome.
Yeah, it's not again, the Rams usually don't do a lot in free agency, right? Usually they either trade for big players or they just, draft a bunch of guys. But, it's weird where it's almost an unusual free agency for them where they kind of are really addressing depth, which is usually not what they do in free agency.
Yeah. New look at the Rams, that's for sure. I think this team's going to be really good next year. I really do. I think they really found their groove, and I think they made some key moves here this offseason.
They certainly have they could be at least very good. I am very interested in what they have going on. So let's move on. Let's go to the Seattle Seahawks. Seattle Seahawks are in the mix as gave Leonard Williams a lot of money. They you can take Pete Carroll off the team, but you can't I guess take that mindset of stopping the run out of the mix. They lose Jordan Brooks, which I don't think is the biggest disaster in the world. They've re-signed Noah Fant. They lost Bobby Wagner, as I mentioned. I don't know. This kind of feels like another C here, right? I mean, you could maybe even talk me into D, depending on the Leonard Williams contract is a good amount of money, but I don't know. I think he's a solid player. Like, I'm going to go C.
I would see too. It's pretty quiet. I mean, there looks like a lot of moves here when you look at the whole list, but it's not really that impactful of moves. Obviously, letting Diggs and Adams go is probably the highlight, but also like you said, the Williams thing is big, but he's not bad. I think, guys like George Fant is solid. I think guys like Noah Fant at that number is solid. Getting Sam Howell, I think, as a backup quarterback's not a bad idea. I mean, he's not going to be a starter, obviously. So yeah, I think this is it was fine. I didn't feel like a whole lot for me for the Seahawks. It still feels kind of very similar to the same team, so I went C.
Yeah. Well, let's move on then, because again, unless you want to do 10 minutes on Seattle, I think we can kind of blow by them. Finally, last team on this list, the Arizona Cardinals, who, I I don't know what they're doing, really, to be honest. I'm a little confused about this offseason. So they lost Marquise Brown, which that trade looks really bad in hindsight. But again, if we're just grading the offseason, letting him walk isn't the worst thing in the world. And I kind of wonder if he was just kind of wanting to go. The Jonah Williams contract is interesting because he hasn't been good in a couple of years. They did give him $15 million a year for 2 years. They added some players who I think are like, okay, like, Evan Brown, Sean Murphy Bunting's kind of a solid flyer. I feel like, although giving him a decent amount of money, paying, it just kind of got a lot of like role players here. I don't really know what the goal is with this Arizona Cardinals situation. I don't think they've gotten a lot worse, but I don't know. I guess I'll go D here.
I went D. I mean, there's just some bizarre moves here. I agree with you. Losing this team got worse at receiver. Now, that could be who they address with the number 4 pick. It's probably what they're going to address with the number 4 pick. We'll see. But yeah, I mean, I think they lost some good players. I think they added some okay players. I mean, you mentioned with DJ Reader that interior defensive linemen don't really get paid. And they pay $10 million a year to a bad interior defensive lineman in Justin Jones. Like, I didn't get that one. I didn't get the Jonah Williams one. Releasing DJ Humphries. Like, I just didn't get some of these moves. So yeah, I have a D.
Yeah, again, it happens all the time. Like, to Justin Jones, like all the time, there's like an interior defensive lineman who I don't know if they just have like some good highlights or what, but I don't. NFL likes big interior defensive linemen, even if they're not that good.
Yeah, that's definitely that might be my worst contract of the offseason, honestly.
Okay, I like that. Yeah,
it's an aggressively bad player for $10 million a year.
Yeah, that's usually not ideal. When you're getting a player who's maybe a net negative and you're paying them $10 million. I'm trying to think what's the other. I could be mean to Giants fans and say that Brian Burns is the worst, but no, you're probably right.
Yeah, I guess you can argue for Brian Burns for sure.
No, Brian Burns they got a good player for great player money. That's
at least you could say like you overpaid a good player. This is overpaying a really bad player. Like, he would need to make a significant progress for that to be worth it.
Yeah, I think so. Hey, maybe he'll do it. I hope he's not listening.
He's like a huge fan of the show.
Yeah, he's like, oh man, I wonder what they're going to talk about when they get to the Cardinals. Bring up my contract. It's going to be great.
Did he actually think that was going to be great?
Yeah, granted, he's probably having a good time right now. I think he's
making $30 million. He's not going to feel bad.
Yeah, I think that they feel probably feels pretty good about it. That is all 32 teams. We have a couple of minutes left. Kyle, did you have any thoughts on the hip drop tackle whole conversation?
Oh yeah. I can't imagine anybody saying that they like the rule. I mean, is it safer? Yeah, probably. Do I think this is going to be incredibly difficult to officiate? Absolutely. I think my issue is I don't like more objectivity being put on the refs, right? Anytime the refs have to make like opinions on things, I don't like it. And I just feel like this is another thing where the refs have to make an opinion rather than like know for certain. Like, obviously, like there are certain things you want to take out of the game for safety, and there are some things that are very easy to notice. I just think it's a really tough thing. It's going to be a really tough thing to judge, and I guess we'll have to see it in action. But like, yeah, I think it's going to be really hard for the referees to notice this. And is every tackle from behind going to be viewed as a hip drop tackle? Like, I'm just going to be curious to see how this is officiated.
Yeah, feels like it's going to be really. I think even like forget about the gray area. I think it's hard to in real time notice it. Like, I'm watching some of these clips and I'm having to like slow down to figure out. Okay, this is what it is. I think it's going to be tough. It is something where they said that basically every week or on average once time a week a player had a time loss injury due to this kind of tackle. So like it is a tough play. It also does feel a bit like the goal is to help out offense. Like, here's the thing. The NFL doesn't view it exactly as a negative when a rule change for player safety also makes it harder for defenders to tackle.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I mean this is definitely viewed as a player safety decision, but it's also going to be viewed as a benefiting the offense decision. And I mean, basically, when you're chasing a guy now, there's no like, how do you tackle him? Like that's going to be the question. You're basically going to have to jump and like grab them by the shoulders and not horse collar tackle, and that's going to become just as difficult, right? Like, and that could lead to other injuries because you're grabbing a guy by the shoulders and hauling him down. Like that's almost just as difficult.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can still tackle it. It's it's going to be tougher. Like
It's
there are
much
still,
tougher, yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think there's been a bit of it's basically flag football now. It's impossible to tackle. I think there has been a bit of an overreaction to this. I guess that's my one take. I think that it'll be harder to make tackles. I don't think this is the kind of thing that like, it's going to be impossible. I think, on average, there was less than one of these tackles a game. Last year, like it's something they're going to take out of the game. It is kind of annoying, but I don't think it's like, I don't know. I'm not as like, the world is ending as some other people are.
I'm not as the world is ending, but I think my thing is because I did hear that clip where they said it averaged like one tackle per week or whatever it was, right? But I think the problem isn't that it's one tackle per week that is a bad tackle. I think it's because the perception of how many tackles could fit that umbrella, right?
Right.
Like
Sure.
it may only be one true hip drop tackle,
Mm-hmm.
but there could be, dozens of instances that look like a hip drop tackle, and how are those going to be officiated is my issue.
Yeah, and do you have to, as a player, like, how do you adjust to make sure you don't do it? You might miss tackles, even if otherwise you wouldn't have done a hip drop tackle either way. That's totally fair. I don't know. Any other? There was some other interesting. I don't know. I guess there's some other interesting NFL rules stuff. Like there was the new edition of the person, kind of the sky judge. That's not what they call it, but the sky judge can now call in and say certain things aren't intentional grounding or roughing the passer, which used to not be a rule. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I do think that's interesting. I think that that also makes a lot of sense because, I mean, there are so many plays where I'm just shouting from a broadcast angle of that ball wasn't past the line of scrimmage or something like that.
Yeah.
And it, these referees are trying to watch a whole play and judge where the ball lands and all this kind of stuff and where the quarterback's feet are, whether they're in the pocket or outside the pocket. I think it makes sense having extra eyes on that.
Yeah, I'm still always in favor of like just have a guy with a Bluetooth headset on who's like watching the game like how we're watching it and can just say, hey, change this and like for any rule like that. That feels like I don't think you should be able to challenge any rule, but I think you should be able to, the person in the booth should be able to call down and say, hey, this actually wasn't pass interference. Pick up the flag.
Yeah. Oh, can they judge pass interference too?
No, but I was just using that as an example.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that makes sense. An extra set of eyes, especially, as we've begun, because I think they were also, they did it a lot with the expediting reviews last year too. And I thought that worked really well where, oh, this is clearly not a fumble, just change the call sort of thing. Like those plays I thought really worked because I think the one thing I have issue is when it comes to like these, these sky judges and these other things is how long some of these review processes can take. And this is in all sports. It's not just football, where somehow tennis is the only one in the world to figure out challenges and reviews. Because anytime I watch a tennis match, those things are fixed instantly. They have that answer in a second. Everything else, it's like a 5-minute ordeal to find out the change. And I just want to get to the point where if we're going to do all this challenging, all this review stuff, I just want it to happen instantly. I don't want the game to completely stop and come to a halt because of it.
Yeah, Key ran in the chat said Jackson wants a VAR, which doesn't work. I don't think that's what I'm saying, right? That's a soccer thing, right? Where they, or am I? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I want, just another ref who's watching, who isn't on the field but instead is watching the game from, at the location. And then also my take is I think I would get rid of challenges and reviews altogether.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was the funny thing with the soccer. There was a VAR incident where I think they said a goal was offside, and the referee on the field misinterpreted it as it wasn't offside and said good goal or something like that. And so there was something where a goal was either allowed or disallowed. But also, like, English people don't enunciate properly, so that plays a part.
Okay, yeah, that's probably what it was. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was watching some. I was watching some March Madness, and like the game is over, and then they're reviewing something that's completely inconsequential. It takes like 10 minutes to. I'm like, I can never watch the end of March Madness games because like once the game is over, I kind of want to still see like the celebration at the end and all that stuff. That's fun, but I never stick around because it's like a 4-point game or like a 9-point game with 30 seconds left and they're still fouling. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, it's tough. I think basketball. I love basketball, but I definitely think it has it the worst. Where the end of games are the end of games can take for absolutely forever. Like, the last 2 minutes of a game is like 30 minutes at this point. It's insane, especially with all these review processes now.
Yeah, no, I'm all about like I really am a believer in like just get rid of reviews altogether. I hate it.
Yeah, I mean, what if we just didn't even show instant replays anymore? What if we just
I like that. Let's do that.
Play the game. Yeah, just play the game, and you have to make the call instantly, and you'll never see it again.
Hockey is the I saw like on the for some reason it came up my feed like the Golden Knights subreddit of like they were complaining about an offsides call, how it got overturned, and they have like an overhead shot where it's like 1 inch over. I'm like, that's not why the goal was scored, because the puck was one. Like you then had to give up an entire goal after this. The hockey offsides reviews are the worst.
Yeah,
because they're so inconsequential to the goal, and yet they still can take away a goal.
It's tough, man. I mean, the other thing too with like VAR is like I think they've adjusted the rules now, but initially like they were judging any part of the body would it be an offside for soccer, and like, so we had guys where like the video assistant referee would have the arm over the line for offside, but you can't score a goal with your arm. So, but it was calling offside. So it's bizarre. Like the whole replay thing, it's such a mess. I just hope we get to the point where we can, make this as seamless as possible, which it might happen. Once AI is refereeing everything, it will work out.
Yeah, once the robots are just playing the games in general, they can just tell us if they were committing fouls or not. My last thought on this, I don't know why we spent so long on it, is I like being able to cheer when a good thing happens instead of saying, "Oh, a good thing happened. Let me make sure I wait and see a replay before I celebrate."
Yeah. Have you ever actually done that? I usually just cheer and then get mad that I wasted a cheer for it.
No, I remember there was a going back to hockey, there was like the Lightning against the Rangers. They scored like a game-winning goal in Game 6. That but I was like, I was kind of like excited, but I wasn't sure if I should celebrate or not because I wasn't sure if it was kicked in or not, and I wanted to see the replay. Like I feel like I did it all the time.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, that is funny. Yeah, I mean it's every sport, right? Every sport's trying to figure this out. Like I said, tennis is the only one that gets it right.
Yeah, and in fairness, I think someone brought it up, but it's like, if they couldn't figure out tennis, like, what are we doing here? Like, you can put cameras wherever. It's like nothing's in the way. Like, that feels like a kind of an easier one to fix.
Yeah, and it's really like the only judgment is basically the lines and like touching the net. So it's pretty easy.
Yeah, I think that's maybe a slightly easier. I don't know. But I don't know. Plus, hey, if we complain about the refs, if the ref gets a call wrong, that's something we can talk about.
Yeah. I mean, some of the biggest moments in like sports history for me are like referees making mistakes.
Yeah.
Like I just like remember the Armando Gallarga perfect game thing.
Oh yeah, the best.
That was absolutely wild.
Yeah,
absolutely wild. So yeah, it's definitely interesting. Are you ready for baseball season tomorrow?
Yeah, it should be fun. I'm ready for the Rays to get my hopes up and then get knocked out in round 1 again. Should be a good time.
Yeah, it should be a good time. My team's gonna suck, but we're gonna hit the ball hard. So at least there's that.
There you go.
I tried to start a fantasy baseball league and found 4 people. So that's the state of baseball. So I'll probably just join a public league tonight. If anyone has a fantasy league they want me to join, I guess hit me up in my DMs at by Kyle Grondin.
Yeah, there you go.
Looking for fantasy baseball. Who's in?
Yes, of course. Kyle Lemon fans on Twitter for our tweets or for fantasy football suggestions.
Make sure not fantasy football
baseball,
suggestions.
Yeah.
Make sure to follow us on Twitter. That is at Jackson Kruger. Make sure to follow me at by Kyle Grondin, and make sure to follow the account page at On the Sideline JK. That is at On the Sideline JK.
And of course, if you like audio only podcast, anywhere you get your podcast, search On the Sideline Podcast. Should be available there. Kyle, what a show! What a job by us. We went through it all. We did some baseball. We didn't even talk about the Bruins playing the Lightning tonight. Should be a fun game.
Should be a fun game indeed. Go Bruins. Big win against the stupid Panthers yesterday, coming back down 3-2. So let's go get another dub in Florida.
Yeah, and the Lightning all of a sudden we're playing well. We can't lose.
Well, that'll change tonight.
It might. It's possible because we have the West Coast trip helps with that.
Yeah, that is for sure. If only we could play the Sharks and Ducks all the time, right?
Yeah, that'd be nice. Like that one year the Leafs were in the Canadian division and they just got to beat up on bad teams and everyone thought they were good and then they got knocked out round 1. That was fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Anytime the Leafs lose is good.
Yeah. It should be an interesting, a lot of interesting stuff. Someone said thoughts on Ohtani. You want to talk about that or you want us to get out of here?
I don't really have an opinion on it. Like, I don't know.
It feels like we kind of wait for more information to come out, I feel like.
Yeah. Like it's, I mean, people are saying ban him from baseball and all that. I mean, unless it's ever proved that like he ever gambled on baseball, which I mean, even the interpreter from the reports on the interpreter are that he never gambled on baseball. Never mind Ohtani, which is, you know, a whole nother layer that hasn't even been proven yet or anything like that. So yeah, I mean, as far as like he never gambled on baseball, like I don't think that's an issue. It's obviously bad, but it's not an issue.
Yeah. What every story is right now, you know, people are jumping to conclusions. People like stories and people like kind of outrage. I mean, I filmed the video. I'm going to post it to kind of clear up some of it. But, you know, people jump to conclusions. All we know now is that, you know, his interpreter paid some gambling debts with Ohtani's money. Maybe it was a, you know, cover up. I don't know. But that's the more juicy story. It doesn't necessarily make it the correct one.
Yeah. And I don't know. Maybe it is, but like I said, if he didn't gamble on baseball, I just don't see it being a thing.
Yeah, we'll see what happens, but yeah, I don't know. We'll wait for more information to come out. But yeah, those are my thoughts on all that. Any final thoughts?
No, let's get out of here.
All right, let's get out of here. Thanks to everybody again. We do appreciate it. Until next time, have a good one.
Peace.